Dave Anderson here with the Fisherman magazine, and this week we're hearing that there are still a lot of big bass up in Narragansett Bay. There's also a lot of big bass still milling around out there in the western Long Island Sound. There's been a weakfish explosion on the New York side of Long Island Sound, and sea bass are just going off, both in central Long Island Sound and over in Buzzards Bay. Stay tuned for all that and more on this week's Web Fishing Forecast.
The Fishing News is sponsored by these fine partners.
Well, we're going to begin in Massachusetts this week, just like we always do, and really across the board in all three states. The thing that's really dominated the reports this week is striped bass. It seems like 80% of the guys fishing right now are fishing for stripers, and the results have been pretty good for the most part. Kind of hitting that summer pattern now, even up on the North Shore. There's still a ton of schoolies up on the North Shore, around the Merrimack River and all around Plum Island, but now that I'm hearing about fish up to 43 inches up there, and just a more consistent bite of fish overall. The night guys are finding the bigger fish. They're doing it mostly with eels and larger plugs. Surprise, surprise. And that kind of holds true all the way down through Boston to the North River. The North River is another spot that's been consistent. There's been a good amount of fish there, mostly up into the low 30-inch class, but I'm sure there's some bigger fish in the mix there. And then as we kind of cross over onto the Cape proper, just as I kind of alluded to last week, I think I said keep an eye on Barnstable Harbor. Well, the fish showed up there this week. It doesn't sound like it's a melee, but there are some mackerel there. There's some bass there up to 35 inches or so, probably a few bigger ones in the mix. But predominantly on the Cape, the bigger fish right now are on the bay side. Pretty much from Barnstable all the way out to P-Town. The northern side of the Cape is the side that's holding the bigger fish and the better bait. As you go around to the outer beaches, the fish are smaller. A lot of schoolies out there. Haven't heard of too many keepers caught from the sand. The guys that are getting some keeper-sized fish are either getting them up inside the estuaries, or there's a few starting to show up in the rips a little bit too. But things get more interesting, just as they kind of have been throughout the whole month of May and now into June in Buzzards Bay. From basically Marion east, there's some bigger fish. The coves and stuff where some of these fish were hanging a week or two ago have gotten pretty warm, up over 70 degrees. So some of those fish have pushed out, and they're kind of on the ledges in deeper water now. Some of them are starting to pile up into Hog Island Channel, and that's, like I said, it's kind of a summer pattern thing. These fish are coming out of their spring patterns, being up inside the coves like that, and they're starting to look for that cooler, deeper water. But as a result of these fish moving into some of that deeper water, the canal is starting to give up more consistent catches, but it's still not that all-out, lights-out canal explosion that we've grown accustomed to over the last 16 years or whatever it's been. It's been a little hit and miss. And the guys that are catching the fish are the guys that are putting in the most time. They're fishing through the night. They're fishing with jigs. They're, adjusting jigs up to 6 ounces probably at full tide, but they're fishing full tides right now, and just to pull a few fish. But the news on the street is that some of these fish have been big, north of 40 pounds. Most of the action has been West End. There's been some afternoon action in the West End as well. Those fish are being caught more on Magic Swimmer, Savages, things like that. But the crowd is starting to grow, and it's only going to get bigger from here. So, if that's where you're hanging your hat, just be prepared. You may be entering a combat zone. That's pretty much the story on stripers right now. But it's been pretty good. Most of the people I talked to throughout the state of Mass have done well. Actually, there is one more report. Talked to James Jukes, and he told me he had spent 3 or 4 or 5 days at Cuddy Hunk. And he said the action was good, but the size just wasn't there. It wasn't really what you go to Cuddy Hunk for. He said he thought he caught maybe close to 100 fish, but probably 7 or 8 of those fish were were over 30 inches and nothing over slot. So that's kind of the story out there. It's still, that summer pattern still hasn't hit Cuttyhunk yet, I guess. They haven't gotten their resident fish yet, but that's the story from Cuttyhunk. Sea bass has been called as good as it gets by a few guys that I've talked to fishing out there. I personally haven't heard about any really big fish, no like 5-pounders, but I've heard of a lot of solid fish in that 3.5, even pushing 4-pound range. And limits have been pretty easy to come by. All those ledges from Mattapoisett all the way up to like Stony Point Dike area, and then even into the approaches of the canal. There are sea bass there, and the action's been good. It's a great fishery to get into if you're introducing somebody who doesn't do a lot of fishing, or if you're bringing your kids. They're very aggressive. They're pretty easy to catch most of the time, as long as the tide isn't running too hard, and there's a lot of them, And the other thing, too, you're getting a lot of bonus scup out there. There's been some pretty good-sized scup mixing in with them, and that bite has been on and good as well. The downer, I guess, in mass is still the fluke. The fluke bite just isn't turning on. Most of the fluke that I've heard about have been caught by accident by guys sea bass fishing. So I guess we're just still kind of waiting on that. Last year's fluke season was probably the worst one that I can remember. And this year seems to be only a little bit better so far. Let's hope we're on our way up from there, because, just doesn't seem to be coming together yet. I did get a report from Greg from Red Top. I'm just going to read that to you verbatim. I got it here on my phone. He said the canal has fish, but you have to work to put in. You have to put in a full tide and work hard to catch a few. Folks who are getting them have been fishing, mostly doing the night shift, and they're fishing the bottom with heavy jigs and bucktails and shads. He said there's some bluefish in the mix, so be prepared if you're throwing the soft plastics. But he said with the new moon coming this weekend, everyone's hopeful that we're going to see, some bigger fish run in, but maybe we're going to get an actual real breaking tide. This is one that I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on. He also reiterated what I just said. The sea bass bite is as good as it gets. He said there's been a lot of reports from boaters of quality fish and limiting out with ease. And then they had one of their guys come in, Mike Radziewski from Rhode Island, and he was out there sea bassing, and he ended up catching a 7-pound weakfish, which he entered in the Dreamboat competition. And I got a photo of that here for you. Weakfish are on the rare side, out in that part of the world, but you do get them sometimes up in Marion Harbor in that area, and once in a while someone gets a big one like that while they're sea bassing. So that's mostly the story in Massachusetts, and we're going to move over now into Rhode Island. And now over in the Ocean State, it's a bass game again in Rhode Island. Everybody just seems to be hyper-focused on stripers, and most of the guys fishing for them are going up into Narragansett Bay, Mount Hope Bay, and fishing around the bunker schools or driving around with the fish finder on looking for piles of fish on the bottom. There's been a lot of fish up there this week, but it's been a week of transition. I personally am seeing change in the fishery. Hard to say how fast it's going to happen, but it's already starting to happen. We'll see how long it lasts. So what I mean by that is that at the beginning of the week, we had a couple days of like northeast wind, hard rain, a lot of wind changes too, and just cloudy, foggy days. I did some fishing from the beaches up in the bay, and I did quite well. Got some really nice fish. Got some good topwater action, middle of the day stuff. And friends of mine were out in a boat doing the same thing. They had fish well into the 30-pound class doing the same thing. But now, just over the last few days, I've started to see guys that I know that surf fish, and then my own personal surf fishing in Rhode Island. All of a sudden, guys are starting to say, hey, I got a 30-pounder last night. Hey, I got 3 30-pounders last night. Hey, I got 5 20-pounders last night. I went out on a late tide this week and pulled out a 33-pounder, and it was just absolutely chock full of bunker. And so what that means to me is that some of these fish that are up in the bay are starting to transition out. I got up real early this morning, fished for a few hours with my good friend Alex up in the bay, and for the first time this year on the fish finder, I saw the number 70. The water, the surface temps up in Mount Hope Bay and in Narragansett Bay have crossed the 70 barrier. Now, I know from my experience writing the Connecticut report, in the Connecticut River, 70 degrees is bye-bye time. Those fish just plow out of the river and, move on their way. There was still a lot of fish up in the bay this morning, so it's hard to gauge when they're going to make their mass exodus, but suffice to say, I think it's beginning. I'm also hearing about good catches of bass along South County. I guess there's been a lot of squid showing up again, which has been fueling the bass bite. Heard about some 30-pound fish around the Watch Hill Reef systems, Sugar Reef and that. And even some fish around Napatree and Fishers. But still, the dominant size along, from Point Judith all the way down to Naps is still like 24, 34 inches. But they are seeing some bigger fish in the breachways at night. And that's just more evidence that we're kind of starting to move into that early summer pattern where we see waves of fish that are migrating in from Jersey and the Western Sound and whatnot, and starting to populate the beaches of Rhode Island. And then it's just a matter of whether they find what they want, if they're going to stay or if they're going to continue on. Fluking in Rhode Island, still kind of, it's better than Massachusetts by a long shot. But most of the guys I'm talking to are, trying to be optimistic. They're like, hey, we're getting a lot of action, but the ratio of keepers to shorts is vastly skewed in the wrong direction. I did talk to a guy on Instagram, Fishing with Mikey. Give him a follow. Go check him out. He seems to have it dialed in pretty good. He says that he's having success by fishing deeper. So he's fishing 70 plus feet of water. And he's fishing bigger offerings. So he likes to try to throw something big. He said a bucktail with a big piece of meat on it. And he does that with the intention or hope that it will cull out most of the shorts. He was out last night. He said he had 28 fish. 4 of them were keepers. So, what's that? A 1 out of 7 keeper ratio? 1 out of 6? So that's 1 out of 7. So that's better. But, it's not 1 out of 12. But it still shows you just how carpeted the bottom is with smaller fish right now. And everyone's hoping that that's going to improve, but it's anyone's guess whether or not it actually will. One of the things that's also affecting the bass bite up in the bay is the bluefish invasion. It seems like some of those really big blues that were down in South County have kind of slowly filtered into the western side of Narragansett Bay. So I am hearing from charter guys that, they're contending with a lot more bluefish on that side. So, a lot of bunkers chopped in half, a lot of circle hooks taken off right at the knot, But it's also providing some great topwater action for guys that don't care if they catch a bass or a bluefish. And, a lot of the bluefish this year have been on the larger side. They've been a lot of fun. That whole western side of the bay seems to have pockets of bluefish. Good place to target if you're looking for those. Another thing that's kind of interesting is my buddy Captain Christian Awe of Awestruck Charters. You've seen him on the report a few times now. He was bass fishing out front on the boat, and he said about 20 feet of water, fishing a sluggo on a jig head, and they caught 3 codfish off Newport. The biggest one was 9 pounds. And I won't be surprised at all when I hear from a surf guy that did the exact same thing. Threw a super snacks or a GT eel or something out there on a jig head and came back with a sizable codfish. It seems like they're making a comeback and they're moving inshore a little bit in Rhode Island. Codfish is definitely not my forte, but I feel like it's a little late for them to be in this shallow. So maybe this heat wave will push them out, but I don't know. Maybe not. There's a lot of deep water there. There's a lot of moving water there. And, if that's something that you might want to try to check off your list, catching an inshore codfish of Rhode Island, you might might be worth giving it a few drifts, this weekend before things get really warm. And then the last thing we're going to talk about in Rhode Island is just the weakfish. The weakfish bite has really plummeted, sadly. We still have the new moon coming, and I'm hopeful, crossing my fingers, maybe it's going to light back up. But, up in the upper bay where all this was going on, the Kickamuit River, the Palmer River, all those areas, I haven't heard a thing this week. Maybe some of these guys are getting them and just keeping the lip zipped. I don't know. But I haven't heard any positive weakfish reports from Rhode Island this week. And that's what I've got for you in Rhode Island this week. So let's head over into Connecticut and see what's going on there. And over in Connecticut, the bass fishing is heavily skewed to the west. The guys that are fishing the Eastern Sound, there's fish there. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's some decent fish. Hatchet's Reef, Black Point, the Race. But most of the fish I'm hearing about are cookie cutters. 20, 30-inch fish. There's a lot of them, and there's some bluefish mixed in, especially in places like the Gut. But there's just no size to speak of. But, I wrote that Connecticut report for over a decade, and, my memory and records indicate that place, the Race and that area doesn't really get awesome until the end of June or early July. So, just bide your time if that's your area. There's big fish on the way. But if you're looking for bigger fish, I would start at the mouth of the Connecticut River. Some bigger fish moved into the mouth of the river this week, according to Andrew from Fishing Factory 3. And some of the surf guys have been pulling some decent ones off the beaches in that region. And then as you go further west, and you'll hear more about this from Max at the end, but still, those Hudson fish are on bunker schools out there, and there's some big ones. We heard from Rick Mola, the owner of Fisherman's World. He got a 55-pounder this week. I think he got a chunkin'. It's a night picture, and all the times I've talked to him, the night fishery for him was always about chunkin'. But a lot of big ones. A lot of 40-plus pound fish are being taken on topwater plugs, swimming plugs, and live and chunked bunker. And it seems like the bite is very good. I'm hoping that I can experience that before they swim out of there. Hope maybe next week. And then the sea bass fishery has just been phenomenal. It's kind of just beginning more or less in the eastern part of the Sound, but from, say, Clinton to Westbrook, in that area, it seems to be red hot. I talked to TJ from Rock and Roll Charters, and he said, a limit's easy. And he's also doing very well on big stripers, by the way. Said he's been tagging and releasing a lot of nice fish over the last week and a half or so. But the sea bass fishery there has been phenomenal, and everyone's catching. Puts out a lot of these group shots of his charters. Kids and mothers and fathers and guys from work and everything else, all just smiling with sea bass hanging off every finger. And I think it's pretty easy to tell how good the bite's been there for sea bass. There's also a lot of scup around now, porgies around now, both sides. But I mean, if you want to get in on like a crazy bite, you got to cross the Sound. Over in Peconic Bay right now, there's been an unbelievable weakfish bite with a mixture of keeper porgies and some really big porgies. And it's, from what I've heard and from the pictures I've seen, that weakfish bite is off the chain. Just unbelievable. I can't say for sure whether it's confined to one area. People are kind of quiet with their exacts, but it's happening. There's a lot of weakfish biting over there. And it's, party boats, recreational guys, 6-pack charters, they're all getting in on it. And the bite's been great. What else I got for you? Well, Fluke. Yeah, Fluke in Connecticut's the same deal. It's just a little better than last year. And everybody's kind of waiting for it to come together, and hopefully it will. I'm hearing about some bigger fluke here and there, Montauk behind Fishers, but everybody's working really hard to get their keepers. It's no different than it is in Rhode Island. Luckily, I mean, for anyone in Connecticut, it's better than Mass. But it's just, it's kind of limping along right now. You're putting in a lot of time. You're catching 10, 12 shorts for your one keeper. But, everyone's kind of hoping, and I'm hoping too, that things just kind of level off in July when things kind of hit that summer pattern. Maybe we'll get a good body of fish that comes in. Let's just keep our fingers crossed for that. And that's what I got for you in Connecticut this week. We're going to throw it over to Max from Fisherman's World now. He's going to give you a rundown of what's going on in the Western Sound.
We're heading out now. It's a beautiful day. We're going to go see if we can find some bluefish on top and some bass. This past week has been really good locally with the big fish. There's been fish to 55 pounds taken by the owner of Fisherman's World, Rick Mola. Guys chunking out in the deep water like 28C, 11B, between that 40 to 65 foot, are finding some nice fish at night. Inside the islands, there's been fish to 25 to 30 pounds taken here and there, but this should only get better with the flooding of bunker coming inshore. Diamond jig and 11B on the outgoing has been the best, and guys trolling wire between 28 and 11B with bunker spoons, umbrellas, and deep divers are finding some nice fish. Guys fishing the bunker schools out in deep water are finding some nice fish 2 to 50 inches this week, taken by P. Henderson on a top water plug. Fluke has been so-so. I mean, it hasn't really improved this past week. Guys are finding their limits. You really got to work through a lot of shorts and sea robins. But I would say stick between 30 and 50 feet outside the islands like can 26 and can 24. Porgies are really starting to invade now, so if you guys like your porgies, I would get out and fish for them. Any local rock pile or deep water reef are holding them. Remember to bring clam chum. This really increases your bag limit. Black sea bass have been increasing this past week too. Guys finding nice limits on our deep water wrecks. These fish will take anything from diamond jigs, bucktails tipped with gulp, high-low rigs with squid or spearing, and clams. The blues are still way out in the deep water, so if you want to get out there, I would go out mid-sound, look for the bunker schools, or just try to find them finning on top on the flat days like today. You can also troll wire with umbrella wigs. This is a lot of fun for fishing with the family. Thank you and good luck.
Thanks, Max. Always appreciate those reports. Love seeing you out on the boat like that, buddy. That looks awesome. And I'm going to leave you with just a little tip, and that is, for these guys that are struggling to catch their keeper fluke, take a page out of Fishing with Mikey's book. The guy who I mentioned in the Rhode Island report, he's fishing deep and he's fishing big. So he's using a larger bucktail, and he's putting a whole bluefish belly fillet or a whole sea robin fillet on there, just to kind of fill out that big profile that's going to make a smaller fluke go, yeah, I don't know if I can take that down. You know what I mean? And I mean, that's pretty basic stuff as far as fishing goes. I mean, it's almost like swim baiting for fluke, or throwing giant plugs for stripers, only in the fluke realm. But, I've talked to guys over the years that have specialized in getting bigger fluke, and that's always the one thing that they highlight. It's just putting a bigger profile down there to, to scare away the small ones and to, entice the bigger ones into thinking it's worth the effort of taking it down. So give that a shot this week. And like I say every week, if you're not a subscriber to The Fisherman, head over to the website and check us out. There's a lot of free content on there. And, I think you do well to subscribe. We've got the Kayak Clash. We've got the Dreamboat Challenge. We've got articles that cover the entire region, really, from Delaware all the way up to Maine. We got reports that cover all that area as well. And if you're a fisherman, why wouldn't you want that? You know what I mean? And if you're really just interested in the videos and reports, then throw us a like, give us a subscribe, and hit that little bell thing down there so you get a notification when we post something new. We're putting new stuff up all the time. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next week. Hey guys, it's me again. I guess I was getting bad information or something like that about the fluke fishing in Massachusetts, because pretty much right as I finished my video, a report came across my desk from Ryan Cannon. He was out on the Lindsay Liz out of Falmouth. They were fishing off Nantucket, and he said they had a banner day. A lot of really nice fluke taken, and the biggest one was over 14 pounds. I got the photo here for you on that one. He said that the guys have been saying that the last few days it's really gotten good, and that's the first really solid fluke news I've heard from Massachusetts, so just wanted to pass that along. And Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the week. Take it easy.
Steigercraft boats, built by people who fish our waters. Serious anglers choose Steigercraft for their 40 years of boat building experience right here in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. Visit steigercraft.com for a dealer near you.